meeting. So, Chuck, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, please shine your grace upon us. Help us to make good and wise decisions. Help to keep our meeting peaceful and cordial. And please protect us as we all travel home. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody here to the January 9th Wells County Council meeting. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Beth here, the auditor, and let her do the election of officers, and then we'll commence from there. So,
okay.
Sure.
Meeting of the year. So we do need to elect a president and vice president for the board for 2018. So we could start off with the president. So if I could have a nomination for someone to...
I'll make that motion that I nominate Todd Monon-Smith as president.
I'll gladly second that.
Okay. So could we go ahead and take a vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries 4-0. We are 3 people short tonight. Okay. And now we do need to vote or to nominate someone for vice president. So could I have a motion for that?
Make a motion to nominate Mike Mossberg for vice president of council for this year.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Okay. 4-0. Congratulations, Todd and Mike. So I will turn the meeting back over to Todd.
Okay. That's quick and easy. Well, thank you. Vote of confidence, guys. Again, we are short tonight, 3 people, but we've got enough for a quorum so we can continue on. So at this stage, we have the minutes, which would have been 2 minutes from back in December. I assume everybody received their minutes electronically. Were there any additions or corrections to both minutes? If not, do we have a motion to accept both minutes as from December's meetings?
I'll make a motion to accept.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. All right, next thing. Do we want to do anything? We want to wait till the end of the meeting for? Okay. All right. Next would be Monty. Would you like to step on up?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Hello.
We have 88 inmates, 8 are DOC, and 12 are F6. Also, you have our reports. Our December report, our year-end report. I gave you the numbers for the transports, again, the courts, the mileage, and transports that we did. And also I gave you a report on our canine, his activity during the year. So you can see that he's keeping
Very busy. Yes, very busy.
That's all I have. And if you have any questions.
Any further questions for Monty? Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Monty. Have a good one. All right. Next thing would be Nate. If you want to step on up on the Wells County Transportation Plan. Yes, Dan.
Okay. I've got Dan Avery.
I was going to say Dan Avery with
with Northeast Indiana Regional Coordinating Council here with me tonight. Actually, I'm going to hand a few papers out for you.
Briefly, Nate, I'd like to thank the Highway Department for doing an excellent job on the roads with the snow that came down and when it did. I'd like to make that publicly known that was an outstanding job, and I personally at least really appreciate it, and I've heard from several that voiced that same view.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. I'll certainly pass that along. I can't take a lot of the credit for it, but I know a lot of them, and I know that they've been putting a concerted effort into doing the job that they're tasked with. So
And
it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy, no.
I know a lot of them got up at 5 o'clock Christmas morning to go out there and plow their routes. So big sacrifice for them, but they were doing it for everybody else. So
good job.
yeah, let me pass this out. We'll get this, but this is kind of the graphics I want to kind of go through with everyone.
sir.
All right. Well, what you have there in front of you is the updated functional classification map for Wells County. It's actually a culmination of a number of months of work between myself, Dan, and NDOT, and working collaboratively between our surrounding counties and Wells County in identifying infrastructure projects. What's important about this map here is that the roads that you see that are not just grayed out but actually have color are different classifications, and hence those roads are eligible for federal funds, federal aid. The other roads we wouldn't. Bridges always are, but with the roads, they need to be identified as part of a core part of our infrastructure. And so when I came on board, we looked at different transportation routes and making some modifications to make roads that in and around the Bluffton area, Ossian, connecting roads, and even some of the state roads meet different categories. They're minor shifts, but tonight I want to kind of point why they're important for us. And that is specifically looking at doing a corridors project. We've talked about it somewhat, but here we're kind of at the point where we need to essentially make a move to try to make Wells County eligible for more federal aid. I've had initial meetings with NDOT specifically about some of the projects that we've talked about, and the problem that we're going to have moving forward is that there's such a large need, and there's really not a cohesive plan to try to implement that. We've got a lot of good projects, but the projects aren't essentially categorized in such a way that make them viable for federal funds through the state. They're too big individually. We need to make them more bite-sized. I can't ask for all of NDOT's funds in the Fort Wayne district for just Wells County because we're competing against Bluffton, Ossian, and others. We're never going to get all their money, but we need to make sure that we're competitive in doing the projects. They're good, but we need to make sure that they're packaged appropriately. So what I'm proposing, if we turn to the second page, is looking at a south corridor. And that identifies some of the areas that have been talked about with the commissioners is the Hoosier Highway, 200 South, 300 South, County Home Road, 3 East, 450 East area. Look to try to make some sort of a south corridor truck route, and that's a small map, I apologize.
Or I'm just old.
I won't judge. So, looking at that area specifically, it's when I did the first corridor project was phase 1 and 2. The problem is to do all of that as one large project would probably be in the range of $20 to $30 million in today's money. And that's just not something we can bite off at one time. It's a long-range plan. I know there's been some desire for long-range planning within the county, and trying to achieve those goals is certainly something that I take on as my responsibility to help you get to those, make them something you can actually arrive at. We'll never get there if we don't start taking some steps. So looking at that and having some of these plans is when I brought Dan Avery in again, saying, how do we try to make this happen? So we've met with NDOT before, and one of the recommendations was to move forward with our own funds the first part of a federal aid application, essentially. If you haven't been through the federal aid process, it's about a 5-year process, and it starts with a consultant selection, preliminary engineering, environmental, essentially itemizing the project and breaking it down. But to do that on something so large is simply beyond our scope or scale. So what I'm recommending, and Dan as well, to make us competitive, we're asking to try to move forward with this area, doing that planning and study phase. Look at the environmental aspects of it. Some of the questions that start to come up when you're looking at Hoosier Highway is any realignment of the Hoosier Highway to avoid the railroads gets us closer to the high pressure of the Panhandle gas lines. So which way do you move, and how do you move the roads without creating new expenses, and what's the most cost-effective way to save it? And you're not talking about saving $1,000 here. Each of these decisions have a lot of zeros behind them. I mean, one shift could be the difference in $1 million in a project long term, and the farther that is out in the process, the bigger that amount is, because you start to see inflation expand that. So you want to make wise choices for what's 20 years down the road. for us. So the benefit for us is that if we move forward on a process like this, environmentally planning, we've essentially eliminated the first of a 5-year process for federal aid. Federal aid, from the time you're selected to the time you're constructed, there's about a 5-year window to do the work. By selecting a consultant and doing some of that work, we've eliminated about the first year, at least 9 months of that 5-year process. Now, you still have 5 years to do it, but we've made the project for you a year easier to do, and we've eliminated a lot of what are black swan risk factors. We've identified projects that we could do locally or not, which is where I have the third sheet here, essentially. The goal from my standpoint is I want to get to the point where instead of having one big project, I want to have a series of smaller projects. And I want to categorize those by what we need to have federal aid for, based on cost, complexity, utility relocations where we couldn't finance that locally. State-funded projects, whether it's through community crossings or other grant processes, and then what we could simply do locally with the MVH funds, our local resources, what we can try to do right-of-way, sections connecting roads. The problem is that we're going to get this mix of jobs. And, for example, Project F1 may need to be done before you do S2 or S3. But projects L1 and L2 here could be done at any time. So what that allows me to do with our toolbox is take projects, put them in order, find the critical path of projects that we try to apply for, and I take this plan to NDOT when we apply for federal aid projects for the future growth for Wells County. And they've got a cohesive plan that has a long-term direction, and this plan continues to be put before the state for federal and state money. So that's going to give us a competitive advantage. I think it's probably one of the more progressive plans the counties in our region have put together for us. It's somewhat aggressive, but it's certainly within the realm of reality. I think it's a logical process for us to go through. So, I don't know. I didn't give you much chance to talk to that, Dan. So.
No, that's all right. But most people that know me, I don't have much problem speaking up anyway. But I think what Nate's laid out is, and we've had a number of discussions, is a good approach to identifying those projects that do fall perhaps outside of the scope of what the county can do by itself. It needs that federal assistance. And there are certain projects that fit well for federal assistance, and then there's those that you are much better off and perhaps even cheaper and more efficient to use other funding sources like community crossing or local funds. And I think taking a good look at a kind of a smorgasbord of various projects and then identifying which ones fit into which category is a very smart approach. It will set you up, I think, for success in requesting federal assistance from NDOT, and then also gives you, gives the council, gives the community a sense of direction, and everybody's kind of moving in the same. And even as far as with Michael in the land use planning, when you have a good idea of what you're doing, the plan commissions can make better decisions to assist the process instead of making decisions that might complicate the process. So we fully support the effort that Nate and we've worked with the commissioners. I think it's a good process.
Thank you. So what we have right now, I'll probably give you a copy of this.
Yeah.
There is a draft request for proposals notification that we would send out to the state. What we would do then is in lieu of waiting for a federal aid notification or call, we are allowed to use the NDOT system for selecting a consultant to do this first phase, planning phase. By doing the selection using the process, we can then leapfrog ahead with, if we are awarded funds for any of the projects within the scope, we could simply move forward with that consultant, and it eliminates the call, notifications. You could simply, once you're awarded money, immediately move into preliminary engineering. And that is part of that advancement of the process. NDOT likes to see you do what you can with your own resources, because the planning that we're proposing to do wouldn't all be for federal aid projects. The dollar amount that we're talking about for this is approximately $75,000 I'd like to set aside from the low redistribution funds that we have. Now, those were funds, part of funds that came back to the state. We used a portion of that for Community Crossings matching money in 2016. We didn't commit all of that funds. There's still approximately $238,000 in that account. And so I'm asking to take that money and put that towards this project. This work is eligible within that. As part of that engineering and planning for right-of-way. We could use additional funds from that for even parts or match money for projects that we identify in this. And that money could all be committed for this, but at this point, I need to have a commitment from council for $75,000 towards this project, and then I could set this out, and we could have a consultant, we could have a request for qualification proposals submitted by, according to this, February 2nd of this year.
How long would that study take, Dave? I know the federal government's intending to put $1 trillion into infrastructure, so would this be done in a time that it would correlate with
my
their
goal
intention?
is to have this report in hand before the next federal aid call comes out. Most likely it would not happen until probably October of this year, which means I need this report in my hands probably by the end of July. So I'm going to try to really, that's why it's really critical for us to try to move forward. Or I may be able to even not have a complete report, but enough report done that I could put together a federal aid application for projects that are within this. But certainly I'd like to have the report done in time to make that happen. Really, 6 months is about what we need, and we're very close to not having that much time left. So, and there's just been, unfortunately, I'd intended to present this back in December. The Zanesville Bridge got in the way of doing that, unfortunately, but certainly there's enough time to make this happen. But I want to make sure this obviously is key. There are some projects that now that this functional classification map is done that I could pursue without it, but certainly it's far better if I can show the state, in all reality, this could be a 20-year plan. When you're talking about a federal aid project that may take 5 years from inception to construction, nose to tail, that starts to drag out a long time. We almost have to layer these projects to make that happen. And this is the first part. One's just getting the plan together and knowing that that's the direction we want to go. The next step is going to be looking for local match money, even if we're granted awards, or moving forward with projects with local funds. And how do we want to do that? So.
And initially, I think Seth had mentioned that in talking with him, he had worked with you on looking through this, and his impression was it was a good start here. So I spoke with Seth on that subject, because I've been looking for a plan for quite a while, as a south corridor in particular for south of Bluffton.
Just to clarify this, Nate, this study would just be for the southern part of the project, right?
Specifically, we're looking at that.
Just to make sure.
I don't want to expand,
Yeah.
and I've talked about trying to create some broader perspectives, because a lot of this planning just happens in my office. It's in me and the filing cabinets that talk about it.
Sure.
And so I try to bring anybody else in that will hear me out to try to figure out what the interests are, what the business interests are. So I meet with Chad Klein and the commissioners and the council members as well, to talk about this, and certainly I'm mindful to take what notes I can.
And the mayor has also looked into this as well, and his take is positive.
I was actually, when we initially discussed going for a federal aid application for Adams Street, I wasn't able to get enough information to be comfortable that we'd have a competitive application, but I actually have a letter of support from the mayor towards the Adams Street corridor, the Adams Street Extended.
Oh, good.
So they looked at it and felt that process, certainly that portion of the project, made sense for their long-term transportation. So there's benefits. Certainly there's major benefits for us. That Southwest corridor, as it stands right now, we have a truck route for the Southwest area getting into and out of Bluffton. I don't think for the county, our county roads, we've got a lot of truck traffic that takes rural routes because there's no short route that's easily identified. This plan would create that. Certainly it's expensive, but from an emergency access, from transportation routes, safety. There's a number of different improvements. I can point to safety issues that are on that plan right now that are included in the January 2000 Transportation System Study. Many of these ideas aren't new. They've been around for a long time, but I'm hoping to give them some movement, traction.
Sure.
Sorry for the puns, I guess.
Nate, how often would we expect you to come back and ask for this kind of money? Is this a once-a-year thing, or multiple times, or?
If this type of money, this would barely be once in 5 years for something specifically like this. Because what we're doing right now is a large plan. And if the stars all aligned and we were starting to see federal aid awards, you might see $2 to $4 million awards for projects. But that's going to be one every maybe other year, and that would be on the most optimistic planning. And it would take a number of years, the better decade, 2 decades, to even exhaust this project scope. You would see other projects start to come out around the area. We've talked about Bridge 106. I present to NDOT next Tuesday to see if we're awarded that project. So we're going to continue to see small projects of that type. But in that, I'm not even asking right now for the money for construction. And if we're awarded money or not awarded money, we need to start building these things. These are, and this is the capital improvement side. There's the asset management side. How does Wells County stay where it's at and stay in good functioning order? And then this is the improvement side of Wells County. How do you want to grow? From a residential, an industrial, transportation side, this is a growth plan. This does not keep Wells County stagnant. This is trying to move Wells County forward, and it's even taking things that have been forecast by transportation experts, unfortunately, 20 years ago. Now, many of these things that are in this old plan have been done, but there's certainly some very difficult issues like this one specifically that we want to try to address.
This is a question for Dan. And I probably know the answer, but I'm going to still ask you. Do you ever see in your different counties and whatnot, have you ever seen any 100% federal funding projects? Are they all pretty much all the 80-20?
They're almost all 80-20. There's occasionally there are certain safety projects, and sometimes the Federal Highway Administration, if they're trying to push a certain type of project in a certain area, for instance, roundabouts in areas that have air quality issues. We were successful at getting 100% funding on a couple of those in Allen County. But it's generally
pretty far and few between, yeah.
And in most cases, that's a little bit of a misnomer. You can ask NDOT for 80% of the funds, but the more a community is willing to do on their own and get projects teed up, as Nate had mentioned, to get some of the engineering underway, some of the environmental out of the way, to show the local commitment to the project, the more competitive it will be in getting additional funds to complete the engineering or to do the right-of-way acquisition or the construction. And typically those...
Like I said, I knew there's a pipe dream, 100%ers out there, but I thought I'd ask. So.
No, the process that we're starting to see is that as the federal funds, and even with the increase, it just becomes more and more competitive. And so what this does is we're trying to match the presentation that other communities can put together. And so we're trying to leverage that by putting together strong plans, strong focus, community involvement, potentially, that the goal being obviously to get funds by showing a very strong plan that eliminates risk. Because with NDOT, and not to say that any of this is bad, they're bureaucrats. They want to see if they're going to give money, they've got an allotment of funds, and they're going to award it to Wells County. They want that project to be completed on time and on schedule so that they know that they picked a good project. That's something that I certainly want to give to them. And to eliminate these risk factors gives them a confidence that this project is going to be done on time and that we have a strong budget, that we're going to stay within that. If it's a wish, and though it may be a very strong wish, But if there are risk factors that are not identified for them, they're not going to feel at ease in investing that funds to us. They will give it to another community. And many communities are starting to even say, we'll do the preliminary engineering or the right-of-way acquisition at 100% to try to acquire the construction funds. On federal projects through Tiger grants, I've been told that I think it's a 25%, 25-75 for federal, but it's something along those lines. But very infrequently are those even awarded at that match. 75-25 communities have to offer to pay above the minimum to even be really considered. So it's you're offering to pay more than what the minimum is simply so that your project will get awarded, and that allows the federal government to stretch the money even farther. So
Would this 75 be part of our 20%?
essentially, it does. I mean,
Okay.
it starts to count towards the credits towards your project.
Okay.
It wouldn't be essentially counted to the construction dollars, but having done this, it's our opinion that that's going to be about the best that we can do for as small of an investment as this is to put us in the pipeline for future projects.
It really positions you to be in a place where you fully understand the project, and so there shouldn't be any surprises. That allows you to stay, you're more likely to stay on budget, but it won't count as part of your 20%. They used to have a program that kind
Yeah,
of worked like that.
drawings, yeah.
It got very complicated and convoluted, and they don't do that anymore. But it does position you to be very competitive, and more importantly, as Nate mentioned, to show NDOT that you've thought through the process, you've got good cost estimates coming into the request, and that gives them the confidence that it's a good awardable type project.
I've sat in on a few of the meetings with the city and Nate, and I'm totally on board. I see it as a leapfrog effect to get ahead of, and very little downside other than the loss of money, but we have to put the money someplace, and this is...
Yeah. And again, it's not necessarily new money, but again, money's money, but it's money that's left over from other projects, so it's not necessarily something we're...
This was part
it's
of the
not
distribution
additional
that was
appropriation
given to Wells
so,
County specifically for this type
for
of
these
work.
purposes, yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is, in the rare instance for county government, you're able to take money to try to make money, and so this is a good opportunity for us. And
I see a lot of value in it.
Well, I do agree, if we don't have a plan, you can't move forward,
Yeah.
so.
This is where it starts. So I guess from our point, you need a commitment from us, obviously, to see what
commitment
that...
that you'll that
Those funds, the
75,000 of that
75.
funds would be moved over to an account specific for that, and then with that, I'd go ahead and issue the request for proposals to NDOT as early as tomorrow, and then we can start that process. So,
What's your take, Steve?
Oh, I'm on board with getting this study done.
And I think you've done a good job explaining to everybody, so there's no surprises here with everybody thinking which way what direction are we going. So,
well, and for those in the audience, there's a large copy of that plan sitting over here.
Yep.
I can roll that out after the meeting if individuals are interested which roads are potentially federal aid eligible projects in the future and where are our needs. I know
From your conversations, did you have any other concerns that were addressed in the conversations you've had so far?
I think I've met with individuals for as long as 2.5 hours about this and other issues. I mean, I made mention of this is capital improvements, but, I made mention of the asset management. What are we going to do long term? There's some issues we're going to have to address. So I won't steal too much from Blake. I know Blake's got some items on his list, so I'll let him talk, and then I'll be the guy. I'll let him sit next to him here. So there are certainly some issues for us, and if the discussion starts to turn that direction, I certainly want to take the opportunity to speak on behalf of that, because there's some needs. We're talking about the future, and there's a bright future for Wells County. I think there's a lot of opportunities are really prime for us to try to hit if we can be aggressive about it. If we sit back and let opportunity come to us, and it will not do that.
I see a lot of safety aspects involved in this also.
certainly.
It's going to remedy several situations in the south part, I think, so.
Well, and just to speak to that, I've been shocked at how often the comments have been, well, everyone knows that that corner is not safe. Why don't you go down there? And I just shake my head. But when you're around that, and that's been the local experience, you know not to go down the road when the water's high. You know not to go down the road when it's dark or icy. You know, that's not correcting issues. That's not fixing the transportation system for you. And so what I'm going to try to do is continue to improve that, raise the bar a bit, set some established standards for drainage and road profiles and the rest. And though you can't fix the entire county in my lifetime, hopefully what I do is I set a bar for you to continue on, and you can carry this on. A lot of the things that we're talking about, I'm not going to see those projects even completed long term. If we do all that, I mean, I'll speak of Larry Owens' experience. A major project for him was the rerouting of 124 around Bluffton. That was probably his keystone project for him with the Gerber Bridge and that. And you know, this project in this area is 3 times that size, easily. And how long that took for this to go? If you want this done in 20 years, we're going to have to be aggressive about really wanting that to happen. So,
Any further questions from the council members? If not, do we have a motion to accept the $75,000 study that Nate presented to us?
I would make that motion.
Do we have a motion? We have a second?
Second.
We got a second. All in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks for your time and your presentation. I appreciate the deployment.
Do you need this signed by any of us or by the council? Okay, just going through the motions.
It
Okay.
goes out,
You-
just keep that for your notes.
You got our
You will
blessing on it.
actually have to sign something at the next meeting. I will work with Nate
Okay.
to get the additional appropriation request, because
Yeah.
we haven't appropriated
To
the money.
move it, yeah,
You're requesting,
to move it.
or you're approved for him to go ahead with the project, but
Yep.
we've got to appropriate the money. So we will do that in February.
That's fine.
And
You got the commitment.
there won't be any money spent,
Sure.
probably about 2 months, at least a minimum of 2 months past when this would even come in. So there's plenty of time to get that done. So.
Okay, well, thank you again. Thanks, Dan. All right, next we have Blake. Blake, step on up and...
I'm going to move one of my meetings, or one of my points up to front, which is the regional sewer district.
Okay.
Leon and Lee, if you want to come up, we'll share it. All right.
You can pull chair up. You can chair up, Leon.
Mike's involved with this, so basically we have everybody here, right?
Nearly on
Andy Stoller, our
Okay.
newest member. So,
Okay.
everybody knows that NDOT has brought a complaint, and us as commissioners don't have a regional sewer district funded board. So, in essence, where we're at right now with the regional sewer district, we have an issue with about 35 homes. We have a lift station currently being used by River Terrace, that's owned by River Terrace, and the electric panel with it. But the pressurized line leaving that pump station is owned by the city of Bluffton. That being said, Roy Johnson, our attorney, has negotiated with the city to find out if we would bring additional people into this lift station, whether we can keep utilizing pressure line. That took a while, but we do have that in writing that we can use that if that's the direction we choose. In July, Roy also negotiated a proposal out to River Terrace asking if they would consider selling, renting, leasing, donating the existing lift station to the RSD or an ownership of. And they were glad to relinquish. And so we asked them for a proposal. We got that back right before Christmas. So it took about 6 months. And they came back with several different things. One, we would have to purchase the lift station. We would have to respond within 2 hours if there's a problem. We would have to pay for the monitoring costs and the review costs that goes with IDEM. We'd have to pay all the legal fees that are involved with transfers, pay for larger or needed upgrades. If we add and the system needs to be upgraded, the RSD would have to pay for those upgrades. We would buy it as is. The system itself was purchased with 2 units and a backup unit. Both units, one unit went bad, and they brought in the new unit. The other one went bad, and they rebuilt it. So that's what the RSD is considering if they should buy, rent, or whatever we need to go back. And then when the whole thing comes to be, like wind turbine or whatever, we have a decommissioning issue. We have to take care of that. All these are at RSD expenses. We're not funded. We dropped the liability insurance for the board members, and Dick Randall is giving us a quote. What to reinstate that would be probably $3,000 to $3,500 would be an annual fee to protect the board members in agreements. We also just found out yesterday, Lee and I will be attending a meeting February 14th with the state revolving loan
and IDEM.
And IDEM with Travis and the secretary there in Indianapolis. So what I'm coming to you tonight is that last year you chose not to fund NRSD, and we're in a position that's not an option. Do I know what it is? I can tell you can I?
Sure.
What the proposal is?
I think you can well the initial proposal. I
The
mean,
initial proposal from River Terrace is $50,000 plus the expedited description.
For purchase, to purchase. Okay.
But that's negotiable.
Yeah.
It's substantially negotiable, I would say.
Sure.
And so we're coming back to you. We have whatever that amount is plus the things involved. We feel an initial $50,000 would be a minimum you should fund the RSD for this year. Possibly we could get by with 40. Don't know where the negotiation would go.
But if it's purchased or leased, you have to maintain it, take over the maintenance and all the other,
Hire somebody.
just what you previously explained, everything goes with it. All
And
the,
then ultimately, this just starts the process of an officially functioning RSD, which a volunteer board is really not going to be able to do. The RSD is also going to have to develop a billing and invoicing system for those because the city has refused to invoice the customers at this point. So there's
for the use of the lift station, or also
the residents,
the
in that
pressure
area.
line
Like the
for the
monthly
service,
fee.
the service,
Monthly
okay.
fee for all the
For
residents
the
out in the Silver
service
Ridge
of the
area.
sanitation.
Right. It's not in Bluffton Utilities
Yeah.
designated area. It won't be unless it's ever annexed to the city of Bluffton.
And Mike knows we're going to have to hire a consultant of some sort to lead this project, to do all the permitting, to get quotes, to do all the upfront work to make this thing happen. There's a lot of dollars are going to take to get this thing even rolling. Now I know the RSD has official rights to invoice for services rendered, and if the RSD was fully functioning, they may invoice more than just the small group out at River Terrace area. I mean, an RSD could invoice every individual in the county that wasn't attached to a municipal sewage system. They could. I wouldn't highly recommend it.
Just wanting to let everyone know that's
They-
the possibility, but we're trying to alleviate that.
Can I ask this, in your experiences with it, has the groups of areas that are affected by it, have they ever been able to create their own entity, to like in this situation, to purchase it and do it on their own, or is it usually always going through a government function to get to where they're at? I'm not trying to throw curveballs, but I'm just curious,
I think both have been applied in different areas around the state, but in Wells County, it didn't make any sense. In fact, it was literally impossible for the McKinney-Paxson group to function
negotiate
in
on their own,
that
yeah.
fashion. And this group out at River Terrace area, the Timber Ridge group, would have a little more potential, but still, they really need a functioning county organization that takes care of these details. It's just really hard for a group of citizens to put that into play and to make it function.
Do you think they could finance their own project with you being the lead? Okay.
I don't really think
Okay.
so.
It would be hard. It would be
To
really
do it, you need the numbers.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just can't be done unless you have.
I'm just trying to keep the
significant-
county out of the sewage, sewage business. if it
And
can help
this sets a
it.
precedent,
Yeah.
because
It
the
does.
county
It
has
does.
not put any money into this yet, and this is just one small area,
Yeah.
and it's probably going to be a watershed event, in my eyes.
Exactly, and that's my last point. We have Liberty Center, we have Toxin, we
Yeah.
have others, Craigville, throughout the county that.
And
Yeah.
one of the statements you said, River Terrace is requesting a 2-hour response time on, and who is going to respond?
We
Well,
have to have a
that's-
subcontractor or hire someone that's, certified. We have to have documentation, what the amount that pump runs, the gallons that pumps, and things like that. Doesn't it? It needs to be turned into. I didn't have it.
You didn't comment, Blake, that part of the lift station's initial cost, I mean, they referenced their 50,000 with a number that said, well, our estimate is it would cost you 75,000 to build a new one. Now, this one was built in 92, correct?
02.
Or 02.
2002.
So if you look at it from 02, we didn't really get operating costs for them to run it, but they did have to replace, obviously, 2 pumps in what would be, 16, 17 years.
Right.
So we know there's some degree of maintenance that's going to be required. Most likely, a project like that would be most preferable to have a contract with a sewage maintenance provider of some sort that would oversee the 2-hour requirement. And like I said, these are negotiated points that, from River Terrace's standpoint, their attorneys reviewed their liabilities and their risks, and they wanted to make sure that their facility was not negatively impacted if they were to sell it to the RSD or whomever, an independent group. But at the end of the day, this is something that I don't think that we can go down the McKinney-Paxson path of wait for, how many years was it? 20 years?
Not quite, but
A long, but a long time.
I mean, I said, well, gee, the city should just annex that region, but Ted made the point that there's a rock quarry in the middle and that won't work. So, I mean, I don't know that, and then there's been other options discussed, but ultimately, this is a problem that doesn't have a simple solution outside of what has been discussed. I mean, we've had at least 4 meetings on the topic with various people engaging, and it's just not going to be a quick fix. And it's something that what ultimately will likely happen, and I don't know if that's been spoke of, but this lift station is the first step. Then that takes care of access to the city's sewage. Then following that up, those properties will then have to
get to
pipeline
it,
it,
yeah.
and then that would be a project that would be as much as $1 million. And that portion of it will be paid by those residents. And so that is the part that if there's no functioning RSD that can actually negotiate terms with the city, that can, qualify. Now, don't get me wrong, we can all guess and we could attempt to make that negotiation happen, but much like Southern Wells in their sewage situation, I think that there's a degree of unawareness with laymen on sewer projects, and that in its own right, had we looked at a qualified person in that area or that field, there's a good possibility that you could actually access funds through the existing state grants and things that are out there to help fund these types of projects over the long haul, if you have some expertise that can help guide you down that path. A little bit like the Nate with the engineering portion of it. There are funds that can be accessed to help get these things rolling.
And we're hoping that with Senator Holman's help, that we're going to be able to find something with, again, I don't know what, but we're
Exactly.
We have to be looking.
Travis is assisting, but I don't think that we can just, the state's already made us aware. So if we take no action, that's almost a signal that we're intending to not do anything. And that's the problem today. And this, I'm not interested in being in the sewage business either, but I do think that taking no action is not a practical approach to this problem. And as I said, whether it's an ongoing negotiation with them without funds, or it's a commitment to some funds that then there can be a plan that ultimately the RSD will self-fund itself through whatever mechanism.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty hard to self-fund
Initially.
based on a
It's
very
impossible.
small.
It's impossible.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. We'll just say it's impossible.
It is.
35 people at this.
It's impossible, yes.
Without some real expansion, it's not going to happen.
Right. So,
What size is the line now that the city owns from the lift station in?
It's a 6-inch pressure, even though the permit says the 4-inch. So the pumps were 10 horse, and they were or 5 horse, and what's actually is there is 10 horse. So everything there is bigger than what the permit was designed for. So size-wise, it's capable of a lot of gallons.
So I guess at this point in time, you're looking, obviously the 50,000 for a lift station's pennies compared to the other, as a project. So at this stage, we're looking, or you're proposing to us that the RSD needs to start creating its own entity beyond just giving advice.
Well, the
I mean, that's pretty much where
RSD
we're.
needs funding to
Yeah.
do anything.
Yeah.
Literally-
Legal-wise, I mean, the commissioners, we've paid Roy for doing his work.
Sure.
We've paid for a study to kind of get a ballpark range of what we anticipate. I think, did we budget 5 or 10,000 for Birch Frank to give us a dollar amount this year?
Yeah.
Could have been,
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
5 maybe.
yeah.
So these bills are collecting-
What it was going to
yeah.
cost, and the commissioners paid for that.
so we are into it already.
It's into it.
Yes.
We are committed financially today
Right.
with some things, but there are in the commissioner's budget,
Right.
which we really didn't actually address any funds particular to this project. It was brought up, it was discussed, but we didn't.
I mean,
move forward.
bottom line is, without funding, we literally can't move on this project. Nothing we can do.
Yeah, understand.
Well, who gives you guys legal authority to make people do what you're suggesting or proposing?
The RSD has a whole section of the Indiana Code that gives them the authority to actually bill for services rendered. And so, yeah, I mean, RSD can do a lot of things, and almost more than I would. I don't really even like some of the authority the RSD has because it's outside really the structure of county authority. It reports much
You
to
go
INM.
farther than what you really think you
I would be
should.
totally. I would
Yeah,
be
you guys are
totally.
appointed, not elected. So
Exactly.
that's-
I would be
that's
totally happy
absolutely rockers.
for this to actually come under the county's authority.
Like the health department,
Exactly.
something of that
Exactly.
nature.
Because then it's.
I'm not to
No, go
interrupt
ahead.
you. It goes so far that the RSD has power of eminent domain.
Main.
And that's
It's really
mind-boggling
Having
to
properties,
me
yeah.
for
If you read the statute, you're
unelected
going
officials
like,
to have that power.
Does that fall under IDAM? Is the umbrella under IDAM technically? Is that where a lot of that authority comes? I'm not trying to
The
get.
either
the State Board of Health is who came to us.
Okay.
And made their.
I'm going to ask Nick just to interject 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into it.
Which means at the Adams County RSD, so.
As part of the Adams County Evil Consortium, yeah, Indiana Code gives the authority for a regional sewer district, or what a sewer district is. The sewer district essentially is voted on and created by the county commissioners. As one of those appointees myself, essentially the answer to the bodies that appoint us. I'm the mayor of Decatur's appointment towards Adams County Sewer District. The county commissioners, their appoint members, council appoints members, and if you don't like what they're doing, appoint somebody else, or appoint yourselves. Certainly, and Mike's volunteered to be one of your appointments here. The reason the sewer districts have authority that goes well beyond what county government typically does is because the operation of a sewer district and sewer utility, it's essentially it's your own monopoly, needs to have those tools to function. What's struggled for Adams County is because we desperately tried not to do the things we needed to do to stay functioning. So, and what that does is it drags things out and drives costs up. You start to try to do things with borrowed money for too long, and then that's not good business. And you got to run the sewer district as a business. You don't need to make money, but you got to pretty much break even. And borrowing money forever just doesn't work. You're tasked with being not so much going after people with problems. You have a health department for that. The sewer district is the resolution arm. So once you know there's a problem, it's been identified, it needs to be turned over to the sewer district to find solutions, and they need the money to be able to put those in place. The sewer district is the arm to borrow money for sewer solutions. They're allowed to bond on their own for projects. specifically it's a user rate bonding, that they are how you get state revolving funds, USDA rural development grants. So having the sewer district is how you get access to state and federal money for utility projects. You don't want to tie those bonds up to the rest of the county funds because it's a separate entity, has its own separate reporting to the State Board of Accounts. That's why you need to have bonding for your members, because they handle cash. Essentially, it's all the same issues that Beth has within her office or other county officials that handle money. So that's a sort of an attaboy to the sewer district, because it's not popular, but that's the goal to go forward.
And when you get to that point, as Adams County has, it takes full-time staff, or at least a staff
You need at least
person.
a person to do that. You know, the volunteers are, it's limited, obviously. You want to have some consistency, but you want to have fresh people, because you just get burned out doing it.
Has that, go ahead, I'm sorry. Has Adams County then incorporated it with the health department, or they work very close?
They
or
work
is it
together.
Okay, but they're
So
still separate
The
units, though.
sewer district is not the ones that go out looking for people that are in violation.
Sure.
Usually what's supposed to be happening, and I think it's a perception thing, is that the sewer district's going out there forcing connect. Well, you've got a problem, you've got a violation that's been identified, or the health department essentially is in the position of putting pump and hole orders. You have homeowners that are going to lose their houses based off of state law. And so the health department doing their job is essentially going after itself to alleviate liability.
Two quick questions. Wells County has not had a comprehensive overview by a consultant. That's a question. And the answer is no. And I'm asking you, has Adams County done that in the past?
What they've done is they've gone through with different violations within the health department, looked at target areas, and they did it targeted.
So it's a whack-a-mole. It's a whack-a-mole
Essentially,
solution.
your sewer, their situation was not so much comprehensive countywide. I think if you sat down with one of your health department members, you could find a lot of problems that would definitely shock you. But they're certainly in the situation of trying to create solutions. You're not going to be able to hide from this forever.
So here again, we've had this discussion before somewhat, and you as a group do not see value in paying for a consultant for a countywide overview of the situation?
It's not that. It's
I don't
money
think,
to fund it.
I don't think you even want to
pay to do that.
If you start looking, I mean, literally tens of millions of dollars if you got into this full county-wide looking for issues. I mean, you could just go down the list, and it's just beyond comprehension the amount of dollars it would take to fund a full project throughout the county.
You're going.
How many is in your
The Adams County Sewer District has got about 230 residents connected to it, and I would discourage doing specifically looking for problems that you don't have solutions for. What you're going to want to do with any study is you're going to want to, one, you've got an immediate problem you want to come up with a solution with. So you're going to have to get a commitment to moving forward on one with an obvious solution and how you're going to finance that and organize that process. And then as you start to get in a position where you want to start borrowing money, moving forward with a long-term plan, work with your health department to target a number of areas and try to get the grant money associated with it. You certainly won't have a problem finding test results that justify the needs for coming up with those solutions, but it's going to have to take some determination before you just say, what's the major problem within the county? Because essentially what you're doing is you're turning over every rock. And so then you're going to have to then solve everything you try to find.
Very good answer to that question.
So you've got some fires right now you need to put out before we start looking for new problems. So that would be,
I hope I'm not speaking out of turn because we haven't really had a big discussion on the RSD board about that, but I think we need to coordinate our efforts with the Board of Health here in the county more than what we have. That's my opinion. I think there's knowledge and experience available that we haven't really tapped into.
Yeah.
That's just my thought. And when I speak of the Board of Health, Mike alluded to an alternative plan to what has been mentioned here, and I think they are working on that right now that would not require us to have anything to do with the lift stations. But it's going to, two things have got to happen. One is that the city of Bluffton is going to have to cooperate with tap-ins on 250 and 116, and the second point being that L.A. Brown has volunteered to do a study on that area, on the soil, and just perhaps build a cluster system that they would operate themselves, the homeowners. But L.A. hasn't got that study completed yet. In fact, he's never installed a cluster system, so he is in fact seeking advice from someone else who has. Those two things have to happen for the alternative plan, but I'm in favor of looking at all options to see what is. I remember one of the first information meetings that we had, Nate made the comment that we want to do it at the least cost and most effective way. Sure. And I just want to look at all options.
Sure. But I guess at this point in time, is a functioning board, to make it a functioning board, do you have any dollar amounts in your mind, or is it something?
I said 50, but it could be with what we might negotiate to offer, it might end up being 40. I don't know.
But I mean, at this point in time, I'm talking about the bills, like with what Roy has accumulated and Birch and whatnot, those type of things. That's.
I was curious with your position on that, Blake, because I don't know in the commissioner's budget how and where you like to break those things out as a separate identifiable cost, because obviously Roy's working on this, and it's billed hours, I assume, and you can say, all right, this was RSD work, and this is commissioner work. I guess at some point it would be a nice goal if we do need to allocate funds to have some reference to it.
If we need to split it out, I'm sure we can get that to you.
It would help.
Yeah, we need a formal proposal.
Well, I was going to say, that's the thing, there's not a real plan. I mean, I understand you've got a direction, but it's not really something that's a plan.
It's hard to give a formal proposal at this point because, for one, we don't know where the negotiations going on with the lift station.
Yeah.
We have no idea when a consultant's going to come back and say, here's your basic dollars to make this happen. Without the initial funding for the RSD, we can't even buy liability insurance for the board. I mean, we have
well, that's what I'm thinking is those items.
To make a proposal for the board.
Yeah, for those
for
items.
What you're talking about. You come on and say, oh, I need $3,000 for insurance. You can't just do that on a whim. Mm-hmm. You got to say, okay, I've been to this guy's giving me a quote. Here's a quote.
Well, right now, the policies that the county has used is general insurance. And Dick Randall is getting us a quote and giving it to us at the commissioner meeting next Tuesday.
Okay.
So
I guess at this point in time, to be more specific, at our next meeting, would you have more specifics on what you think the direction might be going, or?
Not really.
Not really.
No, I'm telling you.
What we've worked with so far from July of this past summer, we have, other than we need to negotiate with what we need to counter back to River Terrace. Who does that? Somebody's got to pay for that, and we've, as commissioners, have funded that so far.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I'm asking to change and pass that torch.
That's where this is really headed. It's going to get to a place where any negotiation with the River Terrace people, or even what the next working steps would be to proceed with a project, are those parts of it that are not identifiable as far as a cost. And then initially the notion that what would it cost, we all thought, well, they should just give it up because they don't have to maintain it. They should be happy. Yeah. So, and that notion that, well, it could be a cheap investment, and then that way that's an option that you can proceed with on the homeowners for their portion of it, then they would be on the hook for that part of it. February 14th is when Travis is, and you're going to have that meeting.
We'll be in Indianapolis.
So there is that other caveat for some funding. I think that it isn't set in stone.
The rural development loan will not
they don't buy
qualify
infrastructure?
for
Okay.
the homeowners there for that portion.
Okay.
That we already know.
Okay.
We've
Okay, he's told you that.
Yes.
Okay.
The dollars are above the threshold. Yes.
Without some working capital, this board has no ability to do anything. We can say, okay, the insurance is going to cost $3,000. We can guesstimate
a consultant maybe $10,000.
Maybe $10,000 to get going. We can say, well, maybe we'll get the lift station for $20,000. I mean, they're all totally
the only thing I'm thinking when I'm hearing these conversations, if the lift station idea isn't what works, you're owning a lift station and it's not a functioning
part of your
Yeah, well, we
process.
wouldn't
so-
actually purchase anything until we absolutely knew that was going to be the
Yeah, I mean, that's my concern is that, you go buy something, then, okay, now we're
And
going
we're
in
not
a
asking
different
everybody,
direction.
you
So it's-
sign a check and tomorrow we won.
yeah, I mean,
You know,
it's,
It's going to be midsummer.
So it's a little bit like need in a way that it's like, well, we want to just know that there could be funds there if we had to take this step.
I think all of us sitting here have to think that, I mean, I'll speak for everybody, but definitely something's going to have to happen here. What it is, I guess, the question.
I mean, if we don't make something happen, IDEM will make something
Well, yeah,
happen. We
it's
have
obviously-
to keep progress
obviously,
moving.
certainly.
We have to show a desire to
intent
make an
and-
end
yeah.
in sight, and they see that.
But isn't it ultimately the homeowner's responsibility to take that waste and make sure that it doesn't go where it's not supposed to go? I mean, it's not the county's responsibility, it's not the city's responsibility, it's the homeowner, because you got homeowners out there that have new systems, correct?
Yeah, 3 or 4 maybe.
So they've done what they're supposed to do. Are you turn around and going to make them pay for a group when they're not?
That's what Paxton McKinney did.
I mean, again, that's ultimately what will probably happen, but I mean, at this point, it's hard to say.
I think we should make every effort to avoid another McKinney-Paxton.
Well,
Just to be clear, the city of Bluffton's receiving funds from River Terrace to accept the effluent now.
Correct. They sell them water, and their sewage is based on the amount of water the organization out there at River Terrace uses.
and when the project, if completed, each individual homeowner would be billed about $64 a month as unmetered sewage for each homeowner. So,
But that number's something out of the air, though. You don't know that to be a fact right now.
yeah,
That's my sewer bill, where I
Yeah.
You're talking about,
But obviously, that's not construction or anything else. That's just strictly a service that the city is watching, yeah.
North Oaks is that, or the people that live on River Terrace stuff. Nick Cobble.
I would agree, Steve, it is the homeowner's ultimate responsibility. The dilemma is that the homeowner's options, I think, unless they can do a cluster system with a group sewer plant, they don't have the area for those house lots to actually indicate their own sewer management area because the houses are too close together.
Okay.
So they're already in a limited situation for the, area-wise, I mean, on the area plan, it takes how much area to put in a
Require at
septic.
least 2 acres, and even sometimes that's not enough.
Depends how it perks and what the soil science.
So 2 acre area per house isn't an option at this
And you
point.
get somebody that'll walk away from their property, and then you have a property
You
that's...
don't have to have 2 acres for a septic system, though.
No, but in the agricultural areas where we know septic systems are going to be the result of.
Yeah, I understand, in a new home, but I don't know how many acres some of these new homeowners that built new systems in Timber Ridge have. I doubt if they've got 2
No, they
acres.
don't have that much.
But they were granted a septic permit.
Oh, they were, okay. So are those new systems, they're actually up to code then at this point?
Yeah, at least the one that's most, there are 2 that I can recall.
Rimke's is brand new.
Okay.
There's that home, and there's the home would be on the southwest side. That's newer, that has a successful new system or newer system when the house was built. Those are just fine. The problem with soil testing is, it changes so quickly that you wouldn't know from one end of the property to another, you're going to get completely different results. And systems might be okay on a couple lots and not okay on others, and that's where.
And if it's not okay, obviously, there's a dilemma there if it won't.
And the
doesn't
big
pass.
issue is about their options if they can't do it, is to pump and haul or to vacate their homes.
I mean, you can just see the short time we've had to talk about this thing, how much of a pickle these things are.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely is.
these are just
Oh, yeah.
almost unsolvable, complicated issues. That's not even getting to the point of what it's going to cost to put the system in, and then to build these guys over 30 years to recoup those dollars. It's not a good solution, no matter how you look at it. But without at least a beginning phase of funding the RSD and moving us ahead towards getting consulting and starting the process, we're not going anywhere.
There are currently 8 homeowners who have a complying septic system out of the 34. 8 are complying, and 1 is already tapped into the pressure line. So that
So it's 34 subtract the 8 then? So it's
Yeah,
even less than the number we're talking
Yes.
about? Okay.
So then you only got 25 homes
Yeah.
who are non-complying,
That are,
and that's a few people to pay for a
yeah.
huge project.
But there's a couple that would like to tap in. That
Well, I
are
know
not
there's
part of
several.
that aren't even part of this group.
Oh, okay, that could be, okay.
Well, I know in our meetings, we've hashed this out a few times, and I will agree that there is no good solution for it, that there's no silver bullet for this, and that's the dilemma here, and it is probably the worst situation of all, because we don't want to make it a countywide business to be in that, and at the same time, I don't think we want a sewer czar here in the county to oversee a new department with an apparatus to operate under what the state's given it the power or authority to do. I think that's really the crux of it. So, as I said, I like to think there's always a good solution to every problem. But this is one of those that I'm not so sure that there's a really good solution. I like the cluster approach. It's going to save us dealing with the lift station. It would resolve a lot of issues, but the dilemma is there's houses that have to be hooked to the pressure line that the city doesn't want to have happen, and then those houses are not able to get to the cluster station.
And the cluster station won't last forever.
And the cluster station is not a long-term solution.
There's maintenance to
Neither
that.
will my own septic
Right,
system.
yeah,
It's not
exactly.
gonna last. I'm convinced that these individual homeowners are responsible for their septic system just as I am.
Yes.
Even though I don't have neighbors this close, but it's all the same animal, and they're responsible for that just as much as they are for their own roof on their house or their windows or doors.
Agree. And that's the tough part for us sitting up here trying to, all of us, everybody trying to.
If there was an easy solution for those individual homes to make it happen, they would.
Yeah.
But they're just not. And if as a county, we don't intervene and assist, IDEM is going to do things we don't want them to do, and we have a responsibility at this point to do something.
Sure.
And without funding, without approval of, and Blake suggested a $50,000 initial funding of the RSD, without that, we're not really doing anything.
I mean, for us to go that pathway, we would have to do an additional appropriation.
I guess I have a question. Are you wanting the $50,000 to go to the RSD, and then the RSD would hire somebody to? Is it going to get additional revenue in the long run? Is that what the ultimate goal is, or are you just wanting to
See,
pay
so far by
expenses?
keeping it zero, it's never been a problem. Now it starts to become a whole new
Yeah, I'm just trying to
animal,
think how this would be set up. If there's something from the general fund that would fall under the commissioner's budget, the commissioners ultimately would approve all claims. But if you're wanting a loan or if you're wanting a gift,
I wouldn't
from the
expect the
county,
RSD to be able to pay this back. If you mandated it, you'd hire a full-time executive director of the RSD. He would then bill throughout the county to develop a fund, and then he would pay the county back. I'm not sure the people in the county want to be receiving bills from the RSD. That might be $10 a year, but it would have to take place throughout the whole county of all those who are not connected to municipal sewer.
Yeah, just a thought. Several years ago, Jim Oswald was here, he could vouch. The Solid Waste District had an issue that they were running out of money. And there was a one-time operating loan that we presented. Beth, were you? No, Laura had been here. That we did an operating loan to the Solid Waste District, and they eventually paid that back. It was a one-time. That's what kept solid waste alive, is what it did. And
the solid waste has a tax rate.
they do, exactly. They have a rate. So this
RSD
is
is not taxable. They can't have a taxable entity, but they can bill for services.
Yeah.
So if the county would say, we're going to loan you money, we expect to be paid back, that was part of the agreement, then the RSD would then, you would have to bring a staff person on, and he would have to bill the whole county.
Which is essentially a tax.
Well, it's a use fee.
You can call whatever you want.
still paying the tax.
It's a user.
Yeah, you can call it whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a tax, but we're not allowed to tax.
Well, but you're a entity that has been
Created.
created by multiple
Yeah.
government agencies.
That guy,
So-
the guy who set that project up is not going to be a very well-liked person.
So that's ultimately what you want, is you would rather have the gifted or whatever to the RSD, then the RSD would take care of paying all the bills that would go through there. It would no longer go through the county, wouldn't oversee it. Commissioners wouldn't approve the claims. It's just a gift to your...
It would be a funding of the
fund,
RSD.
and then you would report through the State Board of Accounts as far as that, I forget what they
Yes.
call that. It's a agency that you have to do an annual
It
report.
would be an annual
Yeah.
report to the State Board of Accounts.
Uh-huh.
And again, when you actually fund a functioning RSD, it's going to take a staff person. So then you add a whole other level, as Nathan probably talked about Adams County having to do. So this is just the beginning of what it takes to make an RSD really function.
So I know you've been around the block on this for quite some time, but other counties aside from Adams, I mean, you've looked into other counties as the way they operate, and this is a statewide problem, actually. Do we see anything coming down the pike
A lot
from the
of them
state?
are different. I mean, Huntington has 5 separate sewer districts. 5 separate. I don't even know
How they manage it.
Yeah.
It's probably a county function of some. It's really, up in the Lake counties, they have a fairly large RSDs that have maybe 1,000 or more members that they bill for their services. So you're spreading out a fee in much larger areas. This isn't the case in Wells County.
Another, I guess, maybe going back to another question I already previously asked, companies like the private companies, like I'm going to use Aquasource as a throwing that out there, just a name, that do some of the water and sanitary. Do any of the other counties just tell these people you need to go talk to these companies to see if they could handle it for them, or is it?
There's all different. I mean, I've been to a few RSD meetings, and there's a dozen different ways that they accomplish this. The larger ones may have multiple staff. The smaller ones will use all kind of consulting and assistance through those kind of groups. So,
But they still keep their RSDs?
They still have an RSD,
Okay.
and it still functions in some format with at least an executive director or something like that.
Beth, what do you?
So how are you going to pay a staff member?
Well,
For
there
just
you go.
$50,000. $50,000 ain't going to pay a staff member. And buy your lift station.
Well, I was going to step back with that, because initially, you would not have to have a staffer. You could
Initially.
you could have some consulting person that could negotiate with some level of skill the lift station's true value. Because as I had that consultant that we attended a Southern Wells a school board meeting where I at that time had brought a couple of consultants that were helping in Whitley County, and they had come in and said, well, there are ways to do this, and it can be done this way, and we can assist in structuring it that, you would pay us to do negotiations, and you would have us engage with the individuals that would facilitate the project moving forward, and obviously there's public meetings and various group of things that would take place. But my sense of it was that, and this is Roy's problem as well, is he says, I don't know what a lift station's worth. I don't know what it can do, what it would cost, what it would be. You want to pay a lawyer fee for me to learn about sewer, to negotiate terms on this project. He says, is that what you want to do? And I said, no, I think that's a bad idea. He says, good. But the reality is there is a level of working knowledge with all of this that I don't think anyone in this room, and I can't speak for everyone, has on this topic. And that's where, not hiring a staffer to run an RSD, but at least to have some level of expertise. My interest in some level of funding was to at least exercise an option with a qualified person on the topic to review the intent here with regard to the
We don't want to get
lift
ourselves in a
station.
bad situation.
I'm not interested in always buying a lift station if someone with some level of expertise were to come in and say, well, why didn't you think of this?
Yeah.
Or why didn't you just do this? Or why didn't you consider this as an option? And that's what I'm concerned about. I would prefer that approach.
And I think initially, especially if it's only 30-some odd individuals that out at Timber Ridge area, that a consultant could take care of 90% of the requirements, filings, permitting, and the volunteer board could still maintain working with the consultant.
And wouldn't need insurance, because they're insured, they're under liability to take care of that as a hired gun to deal with sewage.
Sure.
A hired poop manager, if you will.
Exactly.
But my sense of it was that funding would do that. And of course, for me, my interest was in trying to tie it in with what Southern Wells' interest was, that, if there was a route to go, tying it in with the housing study, that there are limitations in the county for growth because we don't have a plan, that we can't increase population without a plan, then there are cases where a consultant could give you some guidelines on that route too. So when you're hiring someone to do this particular part of it, I think if they're under contract, they can also assist with other things as well. And that being said, Southern Wells, I think, they have funding there that they would, I can't speak to the school board, but I do believe that they would be interested in us working with the RSD as a funding source and as a co-shared consultant to assist on their project as well. Because at the end of the day, the people on the school board are conflicted just the same. You just saw a vote that they were 2-2, because 2 went one way, 2 went the other. So, this is something that the county, on one level or another, whether it's the IRSD or the commissioners or council as a whole, could give some guidance. And I think that would be, I'm not excited about buying a lift station without seeing what the real options might be. I'm not about wanting to say, let's go buy this thing and start down a path where now we are committed. And if someone that knew something more of it would just say, well, why didn't you do that? I don't want to be that guy.
They're coming back to us saying, do you want to take our offer or do you want to counter? And
well, that's why I don't want to.
Responsibility.
Right. We as RSD doing nothing doesn't work. Yeah. So the sewer lift station was a practical route to consider as an option. And if the railroad church would have said, no, we're not interested in doing that at all, then I would put this board back to a position, okay, well, that didn't work. Well, now what's next? Now, we shot the first shot, and then now they countered. So now they are in a position where we have to decide route do we really want to take. I'm not excited about buying a lift station.
Yeah.
But I'm not excited about the sewer business either, just like the school's not. But as elected officials, as leaders who consider these projects, to say now I do nothing, I don't think that's really doing the job.
2 things have to happen right now. One is the board has to have, because we're now going to make some decisions, we have to have some liability coverage. That has to happen, and we have to look for a consultant that's going to give us direction on the next phase of this thing.
With that conversation, Beth, would it make more sense if we were to appropriate monies to run it through the commissioners and let them deal with the RSD?
I don't know, that's where my mind's going.
That's what I'm trying to figure out logistically how
I'm
to
just
do
like,
this.
which way are you wanting to go with it? Because $50,000 ain't going to be enough money. I mean, if you're going to have to hire a consultant, if you're wanting to buy a lift station, you ain't going to have enough money for $50,000.
No.
But then, if the county gifts or whatever to the RSD, and then you, as the board, would be responsible for all the reporting requirements, then the county's out of that. But then next year you're going to need money again. The next year you're going to need money again. It's going to
snowball.
It will
constantly come in
with IDEM and the IFA at our next meeting if there's anything that's going to come from the state on this deal.
But then again, if you're going to apply for grants or something to that
We're going to
effect,
have a consultant that's going to do the work. And
yeah, do you want that to run
Do you
through
want
the
us to
county?
come back individually for $10,000 at a time, or as needed basis?
I would personally rather have you look seriously at someone who's qualified on the topic and to get a serious review of should we even buy a lift station, and then if in that case what we do, what are our options for funding the cost of it and maintenance of it.
I mean, if the county continues to accept the billing from a consultant,
well, I think that absolves the RSD of being required to be insured.
At this point, yeah, I mean,
the commissioners would approve the claims, but then ultimately, the goal might ultimately be that it is going to be the responsibility of the RSD board to have its own entity, and they're going to collect and, from our bill for fees and stuff like that.
Any decisions at all without some type of coverage on this board.
Sure, interesting.
It just, we did it for a long time because we felt
in this manner, it would give, if they were to purchase a lift station, the commissioners would be making that ultimate decision, right?
Well, then it would be
That with the money
and
stream.
the
That's
county
owned by the
bought it,
county.
then the
Exactly.
county owns
owns it.
that
It's an
on
asset of
their
the county.
asset. This is, now we now own the lift station. You know, so do we want to do that? You know, maybe the best
well,
way
like,
done.
Not today.
No,
Yeah.
but that's why I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
I think we need a little time to figure out what makes the
But
most
then again,
logical
they need
sense.
funding
They
now
need- yeah,
because they
need
got to go
money, so-
forward with a
They need to at least get some-
consultant, at
I
least.
think
The building and the consult.
the
Yeah.
county could fund the liability coverage probably. They did the last time.
They did
There
last
was
time.
liability.
For right now, I mean,
We've already saved the county probably 10 or
Oh,
12, 15
yeah,
grand.
for about
sure.
4
Because we
years.
dropped it.
yeah.
You know, it was in place afterward and we dropped it. So, in essence,
So either way we look at it, we're going to have to do,
We're gonna have
we
to
did the
plan it
I
budget
don't
for
mind
it.
having the liability
Yeah.
on the commissioner's side at
Yeah,
all.
on the counties, just running it through the county until it's decided what's the best
Yeah.
option for us. But then where is the funding going to come through? Are you going to do the funding through the general fund? Are you going to go through the rainy day fund? Or you're going to go through the lit funding? You know, so I mean, that's where you as council have to decide where
as
to
a
come
commissioner,
from.
I know this needs to get done. And if you guys don't want to take it, give me permission as a commissioner to say, let the commissioner pay for it.
But you're going to have to ask for additional appropriation that they have to
Appropriation,
approve.
yeah.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
point. And
Yeah, so
that's-
still it comes down to
So
what's
it's
the
gonna
best
come back
place
to
to
you guys,
bring.
but you
Yeah.
know where I'm at, so.
Yeah.
But in that same time frame, you would have the ability to maybe access some further working knowledge on the topic. And
Yeah,
say,
and we would have a
well,
little
is this
better
what our
understanding.
best choice should be, and is this what we ought to do?
Right, but again, that's my opinion, but that's where you guys come in, because I'm not a board member.
Right.
I mean, I'll be honest
Which
with you.
Leon, I mean, whoever, if we were to
Andy,
contract
yeah.
with someone, Andy, to say, okay, you know, we had our own, we discussed it, we, you know, Ron was not just wonderful about wanting to go negotiate the
Well,
terms.
and see, and that's my next thing, is that you as a board,
And I'm not excited about negotiating on a sewer district.
legal, I mean, do we want to pull somebody else? And I don't have.
I want someone with experience to deal with it.
Right. And I think-
It's out of my role, and I'm not qualified. I'll admit it right today.
I agree with you on that, you know, you need, but then again, you need the funding. But then again, we have not even got approved for a budget for 2019.
Yeah, I was going to say
We got
that.
budget approved.
Yeah, so it's
So it
limited,
still
yeah.
comes back to where are you going to ask for
Right.
the additional revenue to
I
fund
think
this?
for, my sense of it, Brian, you're just wanting to get at least some recognition for this
Direction.
board to know that if you do
something.
access a consultant with an opinion on the topic of, well, this is the best choice and this is how it can be done.
And that's the points I'm going to be bringing up. I don't want opinions
Right.
or answers.
I don't-
Yeah.
I want you guys to
Be aware.
absorb it,
Yeah.
Yes.
come back, then we can talk about it.
Well, currently, I'm sorry. Currently, the commissioner's budget has a line item for consultants.
Consultants.
Yes.
yeah.
So, you know, if
It's-
you use the money up and you need for other consultant for other county
We just
business, you may
do
come
additional-
before the board.
we do additional.
Matt
Appropriation.
Birch's, but I
Yeah.
don't know what's left in that line item.
But that's, I mean, that
Well,
would be
there's
the
nothing left in
easiest.
line items now because we're in a new budget year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything's done for
But,
2017.
like you said, we're
But
still
the-
waiting for,
This year,
Yeah,
we haven't got our
we haven't got
notification, yeah.
1782s or
Two yet.
nothing yet.
So
Yeah.
everything, all the work we've done is still hanging
Yeah.
in Annapolis.
But we know that everything, we've asked, and the commission, or council has approved a budget for the commissioners that include a line item for consulting
Right.
fees.
Yep.
So, which
we're going to.
ultimately we'll have to come
Yeah, I mean,
back
that's
for
just,
additional.
that's just the reaction, to make immediate reaction, there you go.
Yeah, you gave me one.
Yes.
I gave it to Nate, Nate's going to give me one. and,
Yes.
Matt Birch has not called me back.
Okay. Well, as I said, I think that from my standpoint, I'm not looking to get deeply educated on the topic in this short a time to be able to discuss or negotiate what a lift station's worth and how it's going to operate. So,
But at this stage, you understand there's direction for you right now that you can start in that budget with that consulting
Is that
to be able to.
So if Dick brings us a premium notice, what do we tell him? We can add it to the policy, or we can't add it to the policy?
Well, you have a liability insurance line item in your
Mhm.
budget.
Okay.
So if you want to cover you're probably not enough. So again, we may come back to the council
Yeah.
for transfers or additional
But we can
appropriations
funnel it
later
that
in the
way.
year if we didn't budget enough. But, you know, at this point, we don't know what our premiums are going to be because he's just now coming in with premium
Yes.
stuff, you know, which, yeah.
All right.
Hopefully, we.
One last thing, after listening to all this for 15 minutes, I
it's
think
a-
there's, or more,
no,
I think there's too much emphasis put on government money and not enough on the homeowner's money. It's still maintained, it's their responsibility. It's my responsibility to maintain mine, and I don't consider mine any different than...
I don't disagree with you at all on that, exactly. Unfortunately, we're trying to figure the logistics of how the government wants us to operate.
$250 a month sewage bills in McKinney Pass.
And you know,
and the thing is $300. And the ladies
system
were-
continues, those dollar amounts might not be that far off in the future, unfortunately.
So I understand the need to be progressive on this and to keep moving forward, but there is nothing stopping the next area from coming up and doing, we're just, I use the term whack-a-mole, and
Well, and unfortunately, that's the way it has to be at this point. I don't see us, if we start going after this stuff, this will be pennies, what we're talking about here today. It's
Fractions of pennies.
You almost have to take this as they come along. It's just that bad. It's just,
what if we get to a point where we've already done this area, and now this area is requesting or needs, and we aren't able to? Now we're being selective
it's
on
the same
who...
across the state, though. I mean, this is not...
I agree, it is the same across the state.
There's not
I
a
hope to get more information from IDEM. There are products
I hope
that
you
are
do.
out there that IDEM has to approve, and they are only systems our health board locally are allowed to be installed. Other states have different products.
Allen County had that situation, right? I'm not trying to bring that conversation
still
up.
right now.
But wasn't, didn't it?
Right, but yeah,
It's
special
still a-
legislation, the
That's-
county
I
excise,
remember that,
300, 400,000, whatever, was allowed to try something, but
And
Keep our
ultimately,
fingers crossed
that was
that
given
some-
up. IDEM gave up the idea and approved the
Yeah.
McKinney packs and projects.
based
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Like I said, we'll keep our fingers
Yeah.
crossed. Okay.
Thanks, Blake.
Well,
Next.
I guess
I know it's thanks for your work.
Manage this problem in a better way.
all right. Thanks, gentlemen.
Hey,
Do
thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it. Now you're by yourself a bit, Blake.
All right, well, I can chime down, so that's good. I only got 7 to go. It's not even close to that long, so, again, these are items, and Steve was part of the economic development, Vicki comes to the chamber meetings, there are housing issues I'm not even going to touch on. The sewage issue we've taken care of, don't want to deal with municipalities. First up on my list is the courthouse stairs. Bobby came to you guys with what we think needs to get taken care of. She did not put it on her budget. I just want to verify that, correct?
I remember. No.
Right, she did not put any.
No, she's
So,
calling now.
based on what the need is, and again, those 2 stones was $47,000 to replace that. So, rather than piecemeal, we had engineering resources give us a quote, $185 to $225, to change the stairs, remove them, pour 2 new set of stairs on the side with the entrance directly in the middle. The 2 side entrances would be closed. Dealt with Chuck and the Historical Society. No issues whatsoever. So that is our goal as commissioners to move forward with that.
So the entrance will be between 2 sets of stairs?
Right.
In the middle.
Stairs to be used?
They have to be left because of egress from the
Evacuation.
2nd level.
Gotcha.
We've tried to work that out, but, with the fire.
And there's enough stairways to evacuate if needed be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We have that approval. The Bluffton Now group is working on the JCPenney Plaza. We would coordinate our plaza and their plaza together. Our project would be separate.
Same projects as we spoke of with the old art or the
It would be blended
regional
together.
initiative?
Our share, and again, we went to Angola, we went to Huntington, we went to Noble County, went to Adams County. The municipalities paid for their renovations, such as Bluffton and those people. The county was not involved from that standpoint. What we anticipate with our renovation to blend in, which is take the removal of the concrete, get the proper drainage, $125. So 125 and 225 is 350 is what we anticipate it's going to be an expense. What I'm asking you as council, are we looking at that from a general fund? Do you want edit money used from that standpoint? Combination? I just want some direction. I don't want an answer tonight, but I want you to think about what we're going to do, the community, how it's going to be all coming together.
So just from my understanding, originally 2-3 years ago with the regional initiative, that's not even part of this. It's not.
Not from the county.
From the county. I mean, the whole project is different than what it was, or is it?
We as Wells County, never submitted a plan.
Yeah, I know. We just heard the plan, and
what Nell's saying is exactly the same as we submitted.
Okay.
That was 2.1 million, Craig, for the
that
trails
was
and
for the trail and the plaza.
Okay.
The plaza is 1.1 million, which includes the county's portion.
Okay.
We talked about that number.
So I just want you to kind of give me direction if you think that's county council allocated money, edit money.
Well, in the past, most of the, historically, because we don't have a cumulative capital development fund or any of those accum funds for this type of project, has typically been through CETA money.
Okay.
I say that just because I go back to the repair, my time being Harbor Council, when it went back to the repairs of the tuck pointing on the courthouse, that was done through CETA. And there was always disagreements and conversations about what's considered.
That's the last thing on my list.
And so I mean, traditionally, that's how the courthouse on those higher expenditures have been taken care of in my time frame, and we've never had to borrow. That I'm aware of. We've always been able to self-fund it that way without, pay as we go.
So at this point, do I have a consensus that's the way we should go?
Well,
I feel like we're in a bad spot because we're missing 3 people to get serious about that topic on an honest.
I don't have to have a decision tonight, and that's what I'm just bringing up the points. These are things that kind of have transpired in the last 6 months that really
We've got a number that's different than we had before.
we need to have a little traction. Right. So we'll just move on since the meeting's getting late.
Yeah, I think, like I said, without the 3, I think we miss a good portion of our board that needs to.
Let's encourage them to pick up the voice and go through the items. The other one next on the list is lawsuits and opioids. And everybody knows we've had a big issue and a big problem throughout Indiana. We've got Fort Wayne, the city, and they're going after the people that distribute the medicine. We've got the county going after the manufacturer. I'm not at the juncture yet, and a couple people have emailed me, and I think I responded. As commissioners, I'm not ready to make that call. Now, if I get more direction from you guys and other people of how or where or what steps we need or back away and not be involved from a quote lawsuit side of it, I'll take all the input I can get because I don't want to be the instigator going out and doing something unless I have input from you guys. So
are most of these class action suits that are started?
correct,
Is that what
and
they're doing?
then you get into the issue where if you're going to take depositions or you have special, fact finding and fees that might come in. I guess I don't want to be on that side of it. If it says we're part of it, but we have nothing in it unless we win type of deal.
What do you guys think? I'm not that knowledgeable just from what articles I've read
my
from
question is,
Jessica.
have we been approached?
Yes, we have been approached. But basically through the Association of Counties. So from that
And
standpoint.
I've probably read the same thing.
Probably. So, and, some of the mayor's, commissioners' meetings I've been to, they've been approached. And that's why, again, these are items I'm bringing up just as information. And then you guys take note, and if you think it's something we need to follow up, I'd like to know. I really will.
At the first blush, my opinion is I would not venture up that avenue, but
I'm not a litigating person.
Yeah,
I don't like the concept of it,
Exactly. I would
and
rather
I'm not for it,
so.
honestly.
And again, of the other 3, would have any input, please tell them.
I mean, I do see the other side of it, where the expense to the county is just so atrocious because of it, yeah. But I agree.
I understand that as
But that's not going to go away. I mean, it's right now. It's
And regarding Nate, my next point would be the bridges and the funding of bridges, the corridor project with the Hoosier Highway. We're hoping that in the bridge standpoint, our bridge inspection comes back here in April, give or take, and we'll know, basically get us back up to speed. Thankful that he has this asset management plan in place and can put everything compiled for us. 3 bridges that we need to keep our eye on. 200, 212, and 156, and those are on the northern part of the project. On our current, which again will be updated, are about 15 years out. So, in that scope, those would be 3 other bridges that need to be really dealt with at some point in time. But the other thing is we don't have a Cume Bridge fund. What is the minimum amount we could put as a Cume Bridge fund right now? Is it 0.1%, Beth?
I have not read the statute. Nate was in my office last week, and I think he might have read a little bit about it.
The statute identifies a maximum but doesn't specify specifically a minimum. The maximum being 10 cents per $100 per assessed value. That would be a very large amount for us, obviously.
100,000?
No, if you did 10 cents, it'd be like $1.5 million. If you did 1 cent.
I'm looking at 1 cent. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we visited that idea.
$1,000.
When we
the assessed value is the spreadsheet that I'd sent you back. If that was accurate, Beth, then the estimated Cume Bridge, 1 cent.
What I'm thinking is if we would take the extreme minimum, that it affects the general budget a little bit, but it doesn't hurt from a 500.
because it comes off of property tax. Because it's coming from property taxes.
Take about the equivalent of $100,000 or $120,000, and put that in a fund that's 4 bridges, but earmarked that can't be used until we reach a threshold, and then maybe bump it in at some point in time, and then also lower edit funds to correspond, and that's where the Cume Cap Fund, for me, the same way. Lower edit down and have a Cume Cap Fund for your courthouse repairs, your vehicles that you replace every department every year, whether it's a sheriff and things like that. But
Now, when we looked into that several years ago when we had the conversations, we were getting ready to start a capital development fund, which would have encompassed bridges and everything at that time. That's when we were having the conversations over economic development. We looked into it in the bridge at that time. I think the max, again, the changes, but I think we were estimating maybe $100,000 or $200,000 was about as much as would generate into it. That's where the capital development fund you could go above and beyond your freeze at that time. We were discussing it. Remember, it was
the capital development.
That was totally different, but it's totally different. Yeah,
where the Cume
it has
Bridge
to
is
within. That affects your levy.
Right.
But at that time, the bridge now is only strictly bridges.
correct.
Yeah. So there's a padlock on that. So it's strictly bridges. So.
But that's our edit money. So.
But when we discussed the idea of that and then decided capital development might be a better an option, the thing was if you lower your edit monies, what happens is that's going to affect the municipalities. So everybody kind of come up for air when that all happened. So it all got rescinded and we stayed.
Again, it's not
And
like
it's-
you're.
I understand. We were trying to do the balance.
We're taking
Exactly.
minuscule amounts. I mean,
Yes.
and minuscule are dollars, don't get me wrong, but it's not like you're cutting in half
Yeah.
or cutting it 25% type of deal. It's fractional.
But at that time, we thought $100,000 to $200,000 was pretty much a thought per year that could be generated into that Acume fund.
Well,
And you're pretty close to what we
Right,
were.
but that's the cap fund. This is strictly for bridges.
No, it's Acume Bridge we were talking, but that's about the dollar amount that we were talking about.
Yeah.
But
in 12, when I came to commissioner and Scott brought it up in the minutes, it was a Cume cap fund.
That's what they talked about.
yeah, we never went to the bridge. Yeah,
Right.
Acume
So
Capital Development Fund. Yeah,
I
exactly.
just remember Cume Bridge Fund was way 05, 02. Frank Corner and Dwayne.
Yeah, well, years ago there was, and they eliminated it for some reason. I don't know why they.
I mean, Noble County, Harrison County, and Allen County, they're only three. And a lot of them are using funds from for their bridges.
Yeah.
You know, Harrison is Riverboat. LaGrange, I think, has got, toll road money. Allen County, I don't know where they're getting their money. But
They're the only three left.
They don't have an Acume Bridge Fund. An Acume Bridge Fund.
But where I'm coming from is, like I said,
Along with us.
Yes.
yeah. So what I'm getting to is that we are given tools, and this is what we hear all the time. You've got tools, use them. As much as I don't like to use them, if the funding doesn't make sense, if we can change things, that you can move it to here, to change it,
I'm a firm fan of an Acume Bridge Fund. I really am. Unless there's something in there that can tell me not. It just makes logical sense that you have one so that you can put there's a padlock automatically on it, so it's only spent for the.
We know we're going to be spending money.
No, we're going to do it, exactly.
It probably makes more sense
So
to everybody
would you just
to know
makes a lot
what's
of
going
logical
put
on.
that in your consideration too.
Certainly.
I would rather look at than to do, say, wheel taxes.
That's my next point.
If you say you want wheel taxes, I would say pick my priority and go with one or the other.
Okay. The wheel tax was put in 2005.
Yep,
Rate of inflation, where should it be today?
I know all these things.
Okay.
I just know that I'm not a big taxing kind of guy.
I can't expect to buy the same thing in
I agree.
05 today at the same rate. It's either half the size or, the portion's, different. So
Yep.
it definitely needs to be reconsidered. I mean, a farm plate for $5 is ridiculous. I'm sorry, farmers, but that's a fact. $7.50 for a car should be 10, 15, whatever. But consider where you have those avenues, that the revenue makes sense for those in the county. And it's a user tax.
Yes.
It's not identified as a property owner. We'll go to road conversions a little bit later. That's not an issue. Highway garage. And everybody knows we paid a higher tax for gasoline and diesel July 1. Not sure where our funds are coming in. I know I talked with Josh today. They're slightly higher. I would like to earmark $5,000 a month. So 5 times 12, 60 grand is what I'm earmarking, if it's possible, that it gets set aside for a new highway garage. Now, location, whatever, that's to be considered at some point in time. But we need to have that idea because, okay, the highway garage we have now is almost 100 years old.
It's
So
past its usable
I
life in a
can't
way.
look at it and say it needs to stay where it is from the standpoint, because in 100 years from now, I think it would be in the wrong spot, or 50 years. I mean, you got industrial park right there, and you've got housing, residential housing. I think it needs to be out on a state road, a little ways away, possibly with either septic capability or municipal sewer. What that could be, I don't know. Please keep that in mind for the three that are not here. And if possible, to have 50 from the county home farm rent go to the highway garage. Yeah, that's
So is that 100,000 a year?
110.
Oh, 110.
60
Okay.
plus 50.
Okay.
no.
I just want to make sure I heard you.
So, and again, just the earmark that we know we got to do something, because we know in 10 or 15 years, Monty's going to want a new facility. So I'm putting these things in your mind that need attention. Maybe one that's not as important. Again, the mayor's commissioners have always said we want a tool. The tool is food and beverage tax. We don't have that. We don't have the capability to do that. The only way to get that is legislation, and the mayor's commissioners in the northeastern Indiana region, us 11, would like to have them put something in terms that you as a council could, don't have to, could enact if you need that as another tool. I'm only bringing that up because they would like the commissioners to give them a letter of endorsement to that effect for this legislative session. I'm bringing it up to you, that you as a body, before, you had to either have an in with somebody in legislation that would have a bill written for you that would get passed, or this is, we could all do it. You could choose to do it, don't have to do it. But at the very end, if you do it, they would like a fraction go to the RDA if you do it over a certain percentage. I don't know what that is. Can't tell you. Just want you to be aware of what they have asked us to do.
Are you talking a retail food and beverage tax?
Fast food or sit down.
Like what Allen County has. for
Allen County,
Marion County.
they go to the
Surrounding
Coliseum
That
building.
tax.
They would have the ability to increase theirs from 1% to 2%.
We have the ability now to initiate an innkeeper's tax per bed.
Correct, we can.
We do have that now, but food and beverage has not been done yet.
Right. Innkeeper's tax would be totally up to you. Normally it affects people that visit. And
That's
a lot of people locally just
hotels
don't
and
go down and
whatnot.
stay overnight at the motel.
Exactly.
You know, it might be your family coming in, whatever reason, wedding, things like that. And, everybody goes to Indy for whatever, and you're paying
And the surrounding counties.
11 to 18%, over and above whatever those taxes could be. So, that being said, my last point is the homestead supplemental credit that goes out really needs to be looked at from the standpoint of, and again, you guys seen it this, I believe, summer, because my name was on the list. I didn't even know I was being considered, but you seen where my number was.
Yep.
It needs to be increased. I'll pay higher tax. My son-in-law in Tippecanoe County, for the same size of home my son-in-law pays in Wells County, is about half. Both are ranches, both in a municipality. 1,800, 900. It doesn't make sense. At some point in time, I'm not saying remove it at one time, phase it out, a tenth of a point at a time. Bring that back into the coffers for the county. I think it would be really more fair. Homes in Willowbrook, that used to be $1,600 for a year. Right now, they're only $700-800 a year. And we're 20 years later. 20 years later, and they're paying half the amount of property tax. We really need to do that. Cume cap fund, again, I touched on that, courthouse repairs, vehicles, and things like that, and adjusting some of where the lit money. I'm not saying raise it all. If we raise something, we can always lower to get it money. Offset. It doesn't have to be, you're going to raise it and soak us more. If it's 2.1% and pump it up a fraction here, you can bump this down a fraction. See where the revenue comes in. Umball could give us, some great points of where that needs to be. Just really consider some of this stuff. And please get back with me. I really want to know, because I want this community to grow. We got housing issues. We've got sewage from the cities, municipalities, and Austin and Bluffton that we have to deal with, water. All these things. 2.9% unemployment. It's a bit vicious cycle. So
Need a few more people, don't we?
we do.
Yeah.
We do. So.
But as the housing study shows, you can't put sewer and water to expand them.
Exactly.
That's exactly the problem.
There was no forethought in municipalities in our county. Got a 100,000-year-old garage, and now you're just talking about it. That should have been planned a long time ago. Our county, Mr. Huggins built a plant in Plymouth because he couldn't get the employment here in Wells County. I think we're down to 451 unemployable people or whatever, and they're totally unemployed. But as part of the regional
you know, the road to 1 million people, we're not going to get there because you can't build houses. And if you'd have a place to build more houses, maybe the 150 to 250s, that would open up some of the 75 to 125s in Boston and all that. But what I hear from somebody else is, well, it'll be in 5 years. Well, 5 years is an eternity today. I mean, stuff moves faster than the speed of sound. There's just got to be a strategic plan for I think for all the counties and municipalities to get together and say, because sewer and water is the tough thing, you know. With
Sewer and water is
the
the most critical item.
It's a limiting factor, there's no doubt. But I do think
They
that,
could pump their stuff from Montpelier, that'd be great. You know, Norwell sometime, maybe the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be looking for water, municipal water out at the high school. Well, where's that going to come from? So a plan of development and where all this stuff goes just really needs to be set down and looked at. So.
Anything tonight that you wanted to ask me that I didn't even bring up?
Plenty to think about. No, I mean, it's nice that you came forth early in the year and brought these things to us. No, it's good.
Again, my numbers and
Certainly.
numbers out there, so please call. Please.
I would make a point, though. It seems like it was a year ago we had some of these same discussions, and I would prompt you to maybe come to us more often.
More frequent?
More frequent.
Okay.
Sure.
I can make it happen. But again, you only meet once a month, and we're meeting twice plus.
I understand.
You know, I've got meetings
But
almost
I
on a daily
think
basis.
pressure makes things move faster.
That's what it takes. We can make that. We can make that happen.
No problem.
Blake, thanks for your comments. I agree, and I agree with Gene. We do need some strategic planning going on in this community
Absolutely.
and it to take all county entities coming together in some format to make some of these things happen, because there's a lot of subjects that just kind of get passed over.
Yep.
And then nothing happens.
And then sitting on the RDA board, Wells County is the only one that didn't participate in any of those programs so far.
Yeah, we
it's
didn't.
like, we just, it's too bad. I mean, all the other counties had trails or the UV project in downtown Huntington or, whatever, over the Wabash with the theater and things like that. But I was just kind of disappointed that we just didn't have that project ready to go. And that was the thing with all the other projects. They were pretty much ready to go. So,
Right.
And we just had a meeting with Trails 3 weeks ago, right before Christmas. So it's in the works. But I would like one or two of you guys, or you can nominate somebody that's not here, to sit with me and Nate to discuss a Cume Bridge Fund and just really see how it's could impact.
Sure.
If we choose, and again, I'm talking the very minimum, and that's why I was asking something in about 100,000 that won't really blow everybody else's,
It's usually a couple
500,000,
cents. Yeah.
just a small portion. So please consider that.
Certainly.
Email me, text me.
Certainly, I'll get
let me
back
know.
in there.
And we can get to it here in a week. I'm going to be going those 3 days, so but, please touch base.
would it be helpful if someone went along on the RSD when you're going down to Indianapolis? I could go along as well if that helps. Travis.
I'll make sure Travis knows, and if he has an objection or whatever, ask him if there could be, Andy or Leon or anybody else.
Sure.
I mean, take a carload.
Well, the more people that ask questions, the more answers they have to give.
Sure.
So,
keep in mind the open door policy or whatever that's called.
We're not making decisions. We're just gaining information.
It's just information.
I think we'd be okay. No decision would be made by the board. Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
glad you came in.
Thank you.
All right, miscellaneous business and
Okay, I got
Nominations
a
for-
couple things. first off, on the appointments, since we've had a reorganization, currently Vicki Andrews sits on the Chamber Board, and Steve Huggins is Economic Development, EMA Advisory Board, Todd sits on, as well as the EMS Board, and Chuck is on the Solid Waste District Board. Now, I know Vicki's not here, but she emailed me today that she is willing to continue on that board. So, and if anybody wants to make any changes, or if you want to make a motion to leave everybody the same on the board, however you want to do it, or do them all separately.
As everyone said, they wanted to do it as they have.
I was going to say, if nobody has any
I
concerns.
believe so. I haven't talked to
No, I'm
Steve.
fine with
Okay.
you.
And Chuck.
I think everybody is.
Okay,
I think-
so,
I'd make the motion then, if that was what it takes.
Yeah.
I'd make the motion to maintain the appointments as they were last year.
I'll second that.
We have a second. All in favor signify by raising your hand. Who's the same? Motion will carry for that. That's simple.
perfect. Okay, and the only other thing I had is I have emailed you some reports, and in your packets tonight, you have some more reports. And one of the things, I think it will kind of help with just some of the stuff like that Blake has brought up, because it does give you some ideas of what kind of revenue. We was looking at real tax, surtax, what kind of revenue we're getting in from our lit funds, and the amount of revenue that we're getting from the lit funds from the credits, versus our CEDIT, LOIT, public safety and stuff like that. So if you have any questions on any of those reports, please let me know.
Curious, on the surtax, that was all part of that legislation that passed. That was raised too, wasn't it, the surtax side of it?
We have not made any changes to our surtax, will tax since we
That was all-
adopted our resolution,
Okay.
our
okay.
ordinance back in 2000.
So those two go together then? They're always together? Okay.
Yeah, I think you had to adopt one to adopt the other.
Yeah,
But I think
okay,
legislation's changed maybe since then, I'm not
Okay.
sure,
But
but.
these have not been adjusted for any inflation or anything.
No, we have not. The
Not
only thing
stationary.
the only thing we changed is that they made it a couple of years ago when they told us that we had to amend our wheel tax to include the motorized cycles.
Scooters and stuff.
So that was done in 2015. So that was just added to, that was just an amendment to add that
Amendment
to it,
so
but we've not
otherwise
increased.
nothing's been...
Yeah.
But we
we've
have
never
the
changed.
ability to.
Yeah, it comes up every year. That's when we bring, we
Yeah, that's
ask
one of
if
the
they want
things
to
that-
change that. You have to change it, and we've
Yeah.
pretty much always been in the middle of the road.
We've not made any changes
So
since
we've
we
left it,
adopted
yeah.
it.
So-
Yeah, so that just kind of gives you an idea. And I think that we're kind of right in the middle
Yeah, I
of
believe
what
we are.
you could go
We've
up.
always-
So I mean, like if we maxed out, you probably could almost double the figures that you had if we was maxed, because we're kind of right in that middle. But not exactly, but it should be about.
And that decision's usually made, what, June or July?
I can't
When
remember.
I
They
think it
always
seems
send
like
it
it's
out.
always
They
been-
want-
Session, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's always before,
Yeah,
usually.
they always
so
send it
it's-
out. But
So we have,
if we have to change it, but then it has to be done by.
because it
ordinance.
takes effect the following year, so that's why I
Yeah.
think
Yes,
the end of
yeah,
when
we have
you
to have
can
it
do
in by
so.
July 1st, I think, or
Something
June
like that,
30th.
yeah.
So, and another thing to just keep in mind too, just like what Blake said, if the council is looking at doing any changes, there is quite a process of advertising and budget meetings and all of that kind of stuff. So my suggestion would be to look at that earlier in the year, although it doesn't take effect till January 1st, but, we get really busy come August, September, October in budgets, so if you're wanting to make changes, that it might be really good to try to look at. Maybe making those done at the beginning part of the year rather than waiting toward the.
Can
end of
you
the
make
year.
a note to put that on the agenda sometime in the future for us? too?
Yeah, just let me know when you want it on.
I was going to say April or so, that'd be
Yeah,
a good
yeah,
time.
I think we ought to just
discuss it and make
set
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. so that-
Even if it
This is
takes a couple of
January,
years.
so February, March, April. You want it on
Somewhere, yeah.
April's budget?
So many things that
Could be-
will pass that it'll just get,
I'll just add it to April's budget. If anything different, just let me know.
that would be great.
All right, April's meeting, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Beth?
Nope, that's all I have.
Anything else from the other council members?
We're going to meet next week for the first time for salary, work
Information.
study program, work study
Okay.
committee,
Gotcha.
and we'll see where that goes from there.
Okay.
Hopefully, we'll have something accomplished in 5-6 months.
That's fine. All good? Anything else?
Nope.
If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same. Concluded. Stick around, we got